Let's bring in Steven Portnoy and Caitlin Huey-Burns. Steven is a CBS News White House correspondent, and Caitlin is a CBS News political reporter. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Steven, I want to start with you. After the Fed raised interest rates, the Dow Jones rose over 900 points, its biggest gain since 2020. Of course, the president addressed the economy today, but he characterized Republicans in a particular way that we haven't heard before. Why the change in message?
Yeah, this is very clearly a messaging strategy on the part of the White House and the president. And it came in the remarks in the Roosevelt Room today. The president was going to talk about his plans for deficit reduction. And he compared his strategy with the Republican plan. And he invoked Republican Florida Senator Rick Scott, who he said has come up with an ultra MAGA plan that he called extreme. And then at the end of the event, he paused for a question. A reporter asked him about the draft majority opinion about abortion, which would, if it becomes the law of the land, would reverse the Roe and Casey decisions. And the president said, this MAGA crowd is the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history. And then he clarified, he said, in recent American history. So the point is that the president is clearly ahead of the midterms and in the midst of the release of this draft Supreme Court majority opinion, trying to define his political opposition. And he's using the term MAGA crowd and extreme to try to paint the Republican Party as the party of Trump that is out of touch, the president would argue, with the mainstream of the country.
Caitlin, speaking of abortion, the Senate is likely to vote on a bill to legalize abortion. What are you hearing from Democrats and Republicans on this?
That's right, Nicole. Well, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is very eager to have a vote codifying Roe v. Wade into federal law to preserve protections for abortion rights. But remember, in February, he tried to pass this bill, and it didn't muster even enough support from Democrats. Joe Manchin voting with Republicans, preserving the filibuster to prevent it from coming up for a debate. So there are questions about what this legislation will actually look like, if it looks any different from the one proposed in February, whether it's just a more straightforward approach. We know that Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, Republican senators, have introduced legislation also to codify Roe v. Wade into law. It's not clear whether that will be included in this. But what Schumer essentially wants to do is, now that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is no longer a hypothetical, as he says, with the release of this draft opinion, it shows that the court is inclined to actually overturn it. It's no longer a hypothetical. It's a very real issue here. So he wants to essentially get lawmakers on record on this. And it's because Democrats think that this is a huge motivating issue for the midterm elections. They've been facing lots of headwinds on the inflation, economy, immigration. They believe that this is something that can reframe the midterms, galvanize their supporters around this issue now that it's no longer just something that's talked about as a possibility, but really at the forefront here. So we'll see if he's able to gather enough votes from Democrats, but this could be an important messaging bill from Democrats heading into the midterm.
Vice President Harris weighed in on the possible reversal of Roe versus Wade last night. Let's take a listen. Well, she addressed it again this morning, tweeting, if the court overturns Roe versus Wade, it will be an assault on freedom. Stephen, what is the White House saying about the leaked draft opinion?
Well, a number of things. The president himself, when he had that soundbite about MAGA crowd we heard just a while ago, he was talking about the broader ramifications of the language of Justice Alito's draft opinion. And he, of course, is a former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a former lawyer himself, and so he is warning the country. He says that so much of the jurisprudence over the last half century or more, he believes could be undone, even though the Alito opinion, it takes pains to say that it only talks about abortion itself. The president believes that the court in the future, if it followed the logic of the Alito draft opinion, could undermine such things as LGBT rights or even rights to contraception, among other things. And the president said that this is the argument that he had with Robert Bork, Ronald Reagan's appointee to the High Court in 1987, who was rejected by the Senate. Ultimately, the seat was taken by Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was a champion of, among other things, LGBT rights on the High Court. So the idea here is that the White House is trying to draw attention to the impact of this draft majority opinion. And Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked a number of questions about it today, why the White House would even comment on a draft opinion that had been leaked and first reported by Politico the night before last. And Psaki said that what's most important is to focus on the impact of this pending decision. And she believes, she argues, that it's something the public needs to know about. And she was also asked about whether the Justice Department might seek to prosecute the leaker. And she said that's up to the Justice Department.
Caitlin, the New York Times released audio where House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is discussing ways to usher out former President Trump after he lost the election in 2020. What is the potential significance of that?
Well, Nicole, we have yet another situation where we're having a recording released about McCarthy, what he was saying to members in the aftermath of the insurrection. And when you compare that to what his other public statements were, downplaying the former president's involvement, helping him, defending him against impeachment in the second go-round. It's stark odds with what he was saying publicly in defending the president. We know that McCarthy had raised these questions himself. And so it's another instance of saying one thing in public, another thing behind closed doors. And he's already shown a pattern of not being truthful about what he was actually saying in the aftermath of the attacks on the Capitol.
And just one more question, Caitlin, before you go. I know CBS News has also confirmed that the former president's son, Donald Trump Jr., recently appeared before the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack. What do we know about his appearance?
That's right. We've been hearing from sources that he did meet virtually with the committee, that it was a couple of hours, and a source described it to me as not eventful. But this is significant because he is someone, of course, that this committee has been wanting to talk to. He also appeared voluntarily, so did not have to have an issue with subpoenas. And that's been really interesting following this committee, because there are a lot of people they've been wanting to talk to. Some have not been complying with subpoenas. Remember, the House held Mark Meadows in contempt and referred it to the DOJ, and some others as well. So this is significant, and we'll see what comes out of it. We know, as you've been reporting, that public hearings are going to start in June. And I think that'll be really important for people to watch, because this has been such an incremental news cycle in terms of this committee. So having those visuals and something kind of all in one place will, the committee hopes, paint a more fulsome picture of what transpired.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Steven Portnoy, we'll leave it there. Thanks to you both.